The history of women's professional wrestling dates back to the early 20th century. While women had been participating in wrestling exhibitions prior to this period, it wasn't until the trailblazing women's wrestler Mildred Burke that women's wrestling would be taken seriously. Over a 20-year career, Mildred would become the 3-time women's world champion under different incarnations and recognitions, helping to legitimize the sport, break gender barriers, and inspire future generations of female wrestlers. Her impact would cause ripples to reverberate throughout the wrestling world and help to pave the way for other female wrestlers to make their mark. Throughout the mid-20th century, women's wrestling continued to evolve, with talented wrestlers such as June Byers emerging as a worthy competitor. June Byers was often seen as the successor to Mildred Burke and the face of women's wrestling throughout the 50s. June had a decade-long NWA Women's Championship reign, which would entertain and entrance fans all around the country. Another name that would go on to dominate women's wrestling in the mid-century would be the charismatic Fabulous Moolah. While her modern reputation may be shrouded in controversy and allegations, the Fabulous Moolah had a legendary career that spanned several decades. Moolah would go on to dominate territories all over the country and would even go on to hold the NWA Women's World Championship for a record-breaking 28 years, continuing to dominate women's professional wrestling throughout the 60s, 70s and even 80s. Though her legacy remains a subject of ongoing discussions, her contribution to women's wrestling left an impact that was undeniable. Over the years, these and numerous other female wrestlers have played a vital role in advancing and elevating women's professional wrestling. Because in the historical context where men's wrestling traditionally enjoyed greater prominence, it was these determined women who relentlessly battled to elevate women's professional wrestling to the same level of respect and recognition as their male counterpart. And they were, for the most part, succeeding in this goal. But that was until Vince McMahon had other plans for women's wrestling. The WWE Slammy Awards had a history of bestowing honours amongst many of its male roster. But in 1997, WWE would decide to introduce a Miss Slammy Awards category. WWE would have the likes of Sable and Sunny posing on stage in scantily clad clothing in front of colleagues and peers, and then implore the audience at home to call in and vote. For many watching at home, this was a notably more mature WWE than fans had grown to expect. But it aligned with the increasingly risque themes the company had been gradually incorporating, and it marked the beginning of a new direction for how the WWE would be presenting its female competitors for the years to come. In 1998, WWE would continue to push the boundaries of television to combat the emergence of rival threats WCW. For its female stars, this meant being involved in increasingly exploitative storylines. On July 26th, before the main event of Fully Loaded, Sable and Jacqueline would be paired off against each other in a bikini match in front of an animated Jerry Lawler and a live audience of Fresno, California. The contest would see Sable in WWE's most sexually provocative moment yet, removing her clothing to reveal nothing more than body paint. This moment would cause shockwaves throughout the wrestling world, and years later, recounting the contest in an interview with WrestlingInc.com, Jacqueline would disclose her reluctance to participate in the bikini contest, expressing her preference for competing in wrestling competitions, a request that would fall on deaf ears. Although the segment would garner criticism from many, it would ultimately prove a success, garnering the desired attention the WWE was seeking. In the coming years, the women's roster would undergo a noticeable transformation, with a diminishing presence of technically skilled wrestlers and an increasing number of swimsuit models, who could be cast in the role for the growing number of scandalous storylines the WWE was planning. But as the audience grew accustomed to the shocking angles, WWE sought to push the envelope in order to keep its audience engaged. In March 5th, 2001, on an episode of Monday Night Raw, WWE would stage arguably its most uncomfortable portrayal of its female roster yet. In an angle aimed at building anticipation for the upcoming WrestleMania 17 pay-per-view, Vince McMahon would seek to humiliate his top female star, Trish Stratus, by demanding that she crawl around the ring on all four, barking like a dog. The moment marked a new low for women's professional wrestling, because whilst the writers had intended for the segment to encourage booing from the audience, the segment was made even more uncomfortable by the positive reaction it elicited from the male-heavy audience. WWE was already in hot water for pushing the boundaries of TV-14 with advertisers and broadcasters, and it's rumoured that this segment had a detrimental effect on a potentially significant deal with Channel 4 in the UK, who are broadcasting select pay-per-views in the UK and exploring the possibilities of airing weekly shows. This segment would also be cut from broadcast by UK broadcaster Sky Sports, who deemed the segment too offensive. In the eyes of critics and fans, this segment was deemed to have crossed the line, yet Vince would continue to persist in presenting the WWE's female stars in an overtly sexualized fashion. One of WWE's most controversial decisions took place in 2003 when they opted to collaborate with Girls Gone Wild for a pay-per-view event. The Girls Gone Wild brand was known for its pay-per-view and DVD releases, featuring inebriated young women engaging in explicit behaviour during spring break. This WWE pay-per-view would be hosted by former WWE commentator Jonathan Coachman, with the biggest selling point of the live pay-per-view being the promise of Tori Wilson stripping nude. And unsurprisingly, due to the adult content on the special and the controversies of the Girls Gone Wild brand, it would never be made available on the WWE Network or Peacock. Whilst WWE would spend the next 5 years oscillating back and forth in their depiction of female wrestlers, due to a shift in societal norms and attitudes and mainstream interest in wrestling dwindling, WWE would decide to shift from TV-14 to PG, staging the very final Bra and Panties match on a March 17, 2007 episode of Monday Night Raw, which would see Melina besting Candice Michelle. This marked the beginning of the end of WWE's exploitative approach to women's wrestling and the beginning of a new chapter for its female roster. After years of trying to build its women's roster, WWE orchestrated a historic moment to reaffirm the credibility of its women's division. On April 3, 2016, during the WrestleMania 32 pre-show, WWE Hall of Famer Lita would recap the history of women's professional wrestling in WWE before declaring that the WWE female roster would no longer be referred to as WWE Divas, but instead as WWE Superstars like their male counterparts. Lita also unveiled a new title belt and revealed that the Divas Championship would be retired in favour of a new WWE Women's Championship, which would become the focal point of a highly contested triple threat showdown at WrestleMania between Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks. The match marked a stark departure from the women's matches of the Attitude Era, and in the end the match would see Charlotte Flair being crowned the inaugural WWE Women's Champion, winning by submission. The match drew critical acclaim, being awarded 4 stars by wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer, and served as a poignant declaration by the WWE that it was relaunching its approach to women's wrestling. Then, on April 7th, 2019, WWE would mark a historic occasion and arguably the most important moment in women's wrestling to date, because for the very first time, it would see its female competitors headlining the biggest wrestling event in the world, WrestleMania 35. A moment that many would once have deemed unthinkable was now reality. The match saw Charlotte Flair, Ronda Rousey and Becky Lynch competing in a winner-takes-all triple threat match for the unified Women's Championship. And whilst it was Becky Lynch that triumphed on this occasion, the true winner of this night was women's professional wrestling, because this moment would play a pivotal role in firmly establishing women's wrestling as an undeniable main attraction in the years to come.